Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of our tutorial. In today's episode, this is the current project. In today's episode, we are going to be making the enemies fire bullets. We're also going to be making some changes to the bullet system, just to make it so our enemy can actually get hit, our player can get hit by bullets. So, as I'm going to say this every single episode, there's a lot of ways that you can do bullets. The way that we're going to do it, I'm going to assume that enemies can actually shoot bullets into each other. Because for the game that I'm trying to make, I want enemies to be able to hit each other with bullets. And later on, we're going to add a check so that enemies, they try not to shoot each other with bullets, but if it happens, it happens. But I'll show you the alternative method as well if you want enemy bullets to just pass through each other and only hit the player. That's actually not too difficult to do. So to start off, I've got the object bullet here, and I'm going to make one small, simple change, and that is we're actually going to make the object bullet, we're going to make it so that it doesn't shoot, it doesn't hit whoever fires it. And then we're also going to add, I'll do this first, we'll add a parent to our player that is parent bullet collision. So our player is going to also have the bullet collision that the enemies have. We're going to use the same one. If you wanted to make it so bullets pass through enemies and pass through allies, you could use two different parents. One is like parent ally, parent enemy, and then use two different collision systems. Or you can use a variable in the bullet and then check that the whatever it hits is actually of the team that the bullet's on, or is not on the team that the bullet's on, before you do the collision resolution. I'm just going to do it this way because I think it's like more interesting, and for the game that I'm trying to make, I think this is more interesting if enemies can actually shoot each other accidentally. So we're going to do it that way. So I've given a parent bullet collision to the player, and then we're also going to go into the bullet, and we're going to actually create a new variable called creator ID. You can call it whatever you want, but I'm going to call it creator ID. And then we're just going to put no one. So by default, the bullet doesn't know who made it. But when we create the bullet, we're going to give the ID of whoever created the bullet to the bullet. And that's going to be really, really, really important. So you can see here, object player in our step code. Somewhere down here, we're creating the bullet. Here we go, bullet firing. And you can see here, we're setting a bunch of bullet variables. We can also set creator, the one we just made, creator ID equals ID. So that's just going to give it the ID of the player. Because currently the bullet will actually hit the player because I've just given him a bullet collision. So we'll fire the bullet spawns and instantly hits the player, and we don't want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to give the bullet the creator's ID. So a way to identify who created the bullet. And then when we do the collision resolution here, when we detect a collision, all we're going to do simply is if other.id, so if whatever we're colliding with is not the creator. So if whatever we're colliding with has an ID, oh my lord, I'm one hand typing, ignore it, that isn't the same, there we go, as the creator's ID, then we do the collision. Otherwise, we just essentially pass through. So we're going to do it this way. This is a way to do it. Lots of ways to do lots of things in GameMaker Studio and in all coding languages. We're going to do it this way. And you'll see if I launch the game again, you'll see that the bullets are the same as they were before. They don't pass through they don't hit the player, despite the player having the collision system, and they hit the enemies still. So that's perfect. Now we're going to make it so the enemies can fire bullets. To do that, pretty simple. We're going to go into our enemy. This is going to be like a basic version. This is like the bare bones. I'm going to do some advanced AI later in this tutorial, where we get the enemies to do path finding, and we get the enemies to have a few different states, and the enemy's going to be reloading, all kinds of stuff. But for the time being, we're just going to do a really simple bit of code that makes the enemy look towards the player and fire bullets every once in a while. Which, hey, that might be what you want. If it's like a turret or something, maybe that's just what you want. You want this kind of functionality. All right, so what we're going to do is I might as well make a function. You don't have to make a function, but I'll make a function. Function fire. And then we'll also have some states. So I'll have... I wonder if I can use the player's states. I actually don't know. Maybe I can use the player's states. Let's actually see if this works. A little bit of experiment. I actually don't know if I have to declare enums a second time or if enums are declared during compiling. But we'll see what happens here. We'll see if this doesn't crash, then... It's not crashing. I think we can just use the enums. I could be wrong. Someone maybe let me know in the comments, but if you do know. But I think enums, even though we declared it in the player object, it seems to still work for the enemy. So we're going to do this. If anyone has any issues doing this, please let me know in the comments. We'll try it out. I think it works. So we got current state equals state.idle. So our enemy's idle. We're going to have to add... I haven't done an animation yet, so I'm not going to add the animations to the enemies yet. That would be pretty similar to how we did it for the player. We could also have... I was going to say we probably should have had a... Well... We could have had a parent object for all, like, humanoid enemies, I guess, but we're not going to do that just in case there is differences between the enemy and the player. I think that's fine. So we won't worry about using like a parent system because it's going to get a bit more complicated later in the game. We're going to have like different kinds of enemies, like all kinds of crazy enemies. So even though this behavior of this enemy, where it's just firing, reloading, idling, same as the player, a lot of the other enemies we're going to introduce are going to be a bit different. I'm going to add like dogs and all kinds of crazy stuff. So we'll just do it separately to the player code. And all we're going to do is we got object player. We're just going to make it, for now, we're just going to make our object enemy face the player and fire bullets incrementally. So what we're going to do is we got to find the direction for the player. I'll write these out. And then we will incrementally fire bullets. Fire bullets. Pretty simple. So variable, actually let's just call it direction. Let's just use image. Let me think. I'm going to make a new variable called angle. This is probably the correct way to do it. Angle equals 0. And then we're going to do angle equals point direction. And that's going to be x, y, object player. And it's going to be object player.x, object player.y. So we're going to get the direction from our enemy to the player. And that's going to be the angle. And then we're just going to set our image angle equal to angle. So we're just going to point the image, the sprite, in the direction of the player. Note that my sprite is facing to the right, which by default to the right is 0 degrees. And so this will work. If your sprite is not by default facing to the right, you'll have to add an offset. So if it's, for example, pointing up, you'll have to subtract. I think you'd have to subtract 90 from the angle if it's pointing upwards, for example. Every quarter turn is a 90-degree angle, and you would have to, like, for example, just like add some number here, which is why it's best to make all your sprites pointing to the right by default, if you can. I would definitely recommend that. I don't know why you wouldn't. You can also rotate the sprites as well in the sprite editor as well, if you have like something you've imported. But yeah, I definitely recommend pointing to the right. All right, so this should face our player. And then we're going to have... I'm just going to have like a bullet cooldown. I mean, this is a simple way to do this. We're just going to change this later. So let's just make it like 2 times per second we fire. Bullet CD max equals 30. And then I'm actually just going to call this bullet CD. It's a bit easier. And we'll set it to the bullet max CD. And then we're going to go in here. I'm going to go bullet CD minus minus. If bullet CD is smaller than or equal to 0, then we're going to create a bullet. Create a bullet. And then we do B. All right, variable B. So we'll make a local variable B, which stores our bullet instance ID. And that's going to be equal to instance create depth at X, Y. We're creating, I think the depth is about 5 for bullets, if I'm not mistaken. We can change it if it's wrong. And we're going to do object bullet. So depth 5. Yeah, I'm doing 5. Okay. That's cool. Where am I? Object enemy. Okay, so we create a bullet. And we can pretty much just copy what we had for our player, to be completely honest with you. So the bullet's going to have a whole bunch of different variables and whatnot. We're just going to copy this. Why not? Why not? All right, awesome. So we're going to set the creator bullet ID to our enemy that fired it. We've got damage equals damage times bonus damage. We can use that as well. We'll just have to create some new. Do I have a damage variable here? B.damage. Oh no, that's just the default damage. Yeah, for now we'll just do bonus damage is 1. That's cool. B.direction equals we don't want this. B.direction should be whatever angle we're using. And the last variable we need is bullet speed, which is going to be how fast the bullets fire. We would probably have bullet speed in the bullet speed would probably be related to the gun later. And we're going to make it so that object enemy, like this isn't a humanoid enemy. And it's going to basically have the same guns as our player. So we can kind of make the... I think in our game, we want the guns to be the same for the enemies as for the player. Depending on how you're doing your game, you might want it so the bullets are slower, for example, if the enemies fire them, and then faster if the player fires them. That's not how I want to do this game. So I want everything to be kind of balanced, and I want the enemies to kind of feel like they're on the same playing field as you are. So I'm just going to, for now, I have 10 for my player bullet speed. We're going to replace this later with just grabbing the bullet speed from the actual weapon. But for now, we're just going to chuck this in because we're, for now, we're not really... we haven't given it a weapon, and we haven't made some new sprites and whatnot. We're going to do some advanced stuff on the enemy soon, but for now, this is basically just going to be a turret that points at the player, and then every once in a while fires a bullet. Bullet CD equals bullet CD max. So after it fires the bullet, it's going to have a cooldown of 30 frames, which is half a second. And so if I click play, this should work. We should have enemies firing bullets. That's a bit of a classic error that we have here, the GameMaker error. Let's take a look. Damage bonus. Okay, I think I called mine bonus damage. And it's damage bonus. I believe that's the issue. I just misnamed my variable. Alright, well, they fired, so that's a good start. They fired at the player, and we have unknown object.f hit. So I think the player doesn't have an f-hit function. Okay, yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, so we haven't given the player a function for the taking damage. That's here. It's also not, we haven't got it inheriting the create function either. So it's not actually inheriting this f-hit function. So we're just going to give it an f-hit function. I'll just chuck it at the top. I like putting the functions at the top. I should probably chuck the enums at the top as well. I'll check the enums first. This is probably a better way to structure the code. It doesn't really make a difference, but it's better just to have like enums, functions, variables, and then just your actual create code. Just so the create code's down the bottom, and it's really easy to manage. All right. Sick. F hit. What do we want to do? I also got to give a HP value to the player. So I guess I can chuck that here. This seems to be where all the values are. Let's just chuck these together. HP equals, let's go 100. Player has 100 HP. For now, we can just make the player disappear when you die. Realistically, you replace this with your own function, like a death function. We can do that a bit later. We'll do a death animation or something. Have a death animation, or like, you know, maybe just a blood splat. Something happens, or he just goes to a game over screen when you die. I don't know. We'll do something. We'll do something cool. But for now, we can just destroy the player. So when it runs out of health. So when we get hit by a bullet, what happens? We take damage. Our HP gets reduced by the damage of the bullet. If our HP is less than 0, we get destroyed. That's pretty simple. The bullets do about 5 damage, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Or was it 10? I think it was 5. So yeah, you can see that we're getting hit by the bullet. And our player should just disappear. Yeah. Awesome. Now we have another error here. It says, in our enemy, we're getting the distance to the player, but the player doesn't exist because we destroyed it. So to fix this kind of issue, if you ever want to reference another object directly like this, object player.x, we want to grab the, we want to check that it exists. There's a function if instance exists, and then object player. And so if it exists, and then we might as well chuck this entire code inside this. If the player doesn't exist, we don't need to do any of this. It's all worthless. There's no point firing at the player if the player doesn't exist. We could also, for example, there's a lot of things you could do. We could do target. We can do target equals no one. See if this works, actually. I'm actually going to see if this crashes or not. Might crash. No. So if I put target to no one, then they're not doing anything. They're just chilling. And then what we can do is we can actually set the target to the player. And why this is useful is that we might not actually want the enemies to fire at the player later. We might want the enemies to fire at allies of ours. We might want them to fire at each other if they, like Halo, you have like the Marines fire at the enemies, but then if you attack the Marines, they'll fire at you. Yeah, so you want to have a target, right? And a target, depending on your game, maybe they only fire at the player, but depending on your game, like it's nice to have a variable where we can make it so they can fire at things other than the player, right? So that's why we have this target variable here. And we check whether the target exists. But for now, we're just going to set it to the player. So this should work if I just go target equals object player. We'll just do that. Target equals object player. Let's see if that works. Should go back to the behavior we had before. And our player's getting murked, as you can see. And he's dead. And now they stopped firing. So awesome. That seems to work really, really well. One last thing I might do is in this function of the player, I think we had, why does it say default hit by bullet? What is going on here? Shouldn't say, hang on one second. Default hit by bullet? Hello? Also, you can see the bullets, because they're the same bullets, they can smash glass and such as well, which is quite cool. Where are these default? And he also shot his teammate. So, you can make it so they can't shoot at teammates. For this game, we're going to make it so that the enemies actually check. They're going to check the line of sight, and they're only going to fire when there's a direct line of sight to the player or to whatever their target is. So that's going to be really, really, really cool. Because that means enemies will not shoot each other in the back. But maybe we make it so it's possible that they can, but the AI is going to prevent them from doing it in theory. And then, it's kind of like an emergent thing if they actually do, right? I'm also going to make it so enemies can pick up power-ups in this game as well. Basically just giving the enemies the ability to do a lot of stuff, which would be quite cool. Because I haven't seen a lot of games that do that, and sort of make the enemy AI quite cool. I think this is all good. I'm just trying to work out why this message is popping up. So, parent bullet collision. Let's take a look. Default hit by bullet. Why is this coming up? Do I have the object table? Parent wall. Oh, I see these ones here. Okay, so it's actually the table because the table's getting shot over. It's calling this function, but it doesn't actually do anything. That's fine. That's all right. We can leave that. I might just show the HP as well. So let's just do show debug message HP. So that should just show the player's HP. We can actually write it like player HP and then like plus, and then we'll convert that to a string. You always need to convert to a string if you're trying to attach it to the end of another string. Like you can't just have a like a number variable. You always get converted to a string. And you can see here that every time the player gets hit, we can see the player's HP is going down. So it's going down by 5 every time, so it's working. And yeah, that's going to be all for today's tutorial. I hope you guys are enjoying the series. We're going to really start polishing the game a lot from here on out. I'm going to add more advanced enemy AI. We still got to do, I'm going to do like weapon throwing is going to be in a future video. Weapon throwing, more advanced enemy AI, particle effects, just really cool effects. I got a whole bunch of cool effects and such. And I'm mostly looking forward to the enemy AI and such. That's going to be really, really good because not a lot of tutorials, I don't think, are really going into more advanced AI and more advanced enemies. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.